McDonnell Douglas AH-64 Apache is the ultimate attack helicopter. It was designed from scratch to be a dedicated weapons platform. It can fly frontline attack missions during the day or at night, in clear skies or the worst of weather. The electronic eyes of the Apache can see through fog, dust, rain, or darkness. Its target acquisition designation sight aims a laser beam wherever the gunner points his head. The Apache's night vision infrared sensor lights up any nearby enemy activities. No Soviet tank can hide from the Apache for very long. The Soviet Union's military doctrine professes a belief in the massive deployment of heavily armored tanks to achieve its goals. But if NATO's deterrence to stop this threat is not enough, the Apache will unleash its offensive might to destroy the best of Soviet armor. Hellfire and TOW anti-tank missiles, sidearm anti-radiation missiles, Stinger anti-air missiles, air-to-ground rockets, and a 30mm chain gun will ensure an Apache victory. Although the Apache is built in Mesa, Arizona, the attack helicopter's baptism of fire took place deep in the inaccessible jungles of Vietnam. The South Vietnamese people were under attack from the North's invading army and the South's own Viet Cong insurgents. American soldiers visited many of the normally peaceful villages. They tried to explain to the peasants living there how to keep from falling into the hands of communist domination. Having suffered under European colonialism for more than 100 years, the villagers were generally distrustful of any foreign intervention. It was clear to the American command that traditional military tactics were not going to work in Vietnam. These assorted simple grass houses and flooded rice paddies were frequently hidden amongst the dense jungle growth. Normal transportation to the villages by personnel carriers was almost impossible. The air mobile concept was about to be born. The Viet Cong was a different kind of enemy. They worshipped Ho Chi Minh and his Chinese ally, Mao Zedong, as if they were gods. The Viet Cong guerrilla leaders devised insidious plans to attack facilities which were intended to help modernize the impoverished countryside. With a fanatical devotion to their communist cause, volunteers for these raids were never in short supply. This more than once made up for a lack of sophisticated weaponry. Their ingenious reuse of unexploded U.S. ordnance to make their own homemade bombs would again and again cause tremendous damage to property and the loss of many lives. The voices of democracy were not about to let these acts go unanswered. In 1962, Marine UH-34 Seahorse helicopters began to fly operations from Soc Trang and Da Nang. Ground troops were transported to South Vietnamese highlands, jungles, and villages to combat the Viet Cong in their own strongholds. The day had dawned for air mobility. The utilitarian Seahorses were designed strictly to land Marines into combat. The only weapons aboard the Seahorse were grease guns carried by the co-pilot and crew chief. The ground troops dropped off in hot landing zones soon found themselves in fierce firefights with the Viet Cong forces. Somewhat out of place in a jungle, armored vehicles frequently found the going rough. Their personnel incurred many casualties. The personnel losses were heavy when troops were landed into ambushed LZs. For now, the jungle belonged to the VC. The strength of the Viet Cong grew as they added captured U.S. weapons to their own supply of Chinese and Soviet arms. A more battle-worthy helicopter was needed to fight this elusive enemy. The Bell UH-1 Iroquois utility helicopter was affectionately nicknamed Huey. It saw so much action with the Army, Navy, and Marines that the Huey has become the symbol of American involvement in the Vietnam War. The powerful turbine engine spun the Huey's twin-bladed rotor to peak performances and also created its distinctive thwop sound. The Huey was reliable, and its sturdy construction allowed it to take a lot of punishment and still keep flying. The first Hueys could transport up to 8 armed troops into battle. 2 door gunners provided it with modest aerial firepower. Numerous airborne brigades were formed around Hueys. However, the Viet Cong were quick to realize the U.S. expanding air mobile threat and slid deeper into the jungle to wait. For a wounded soldier, the happiest sight in the world was a medevac Huey. Its ability to quickly transport dying personnel from a firefight to a medical facility was instrumental in saving many lives. The medical treatment provided to the U.S. soldier fighting in Vietnam was the best ever. But the casualty and loss rates were still too high, even with the Huey transports. The Viet Cong readily adapted to any new air mobile tactic. The military recognized the need to increase helicopter lethality if they were to soften up fierce Viet Cong strongholds. Standard Hueys were stripped of their troop-carrying fixtures. In their place, 4 7.62 millimeter machine guns and 2 rocket launching systems were added to the existing door gunner mounts. The gunships which escorted the Huey transports were to overnight significantly lower both helicopter loss rates and troop casualties. The gunships pounded the VC. They in turn called on their beefed-up air defenses. The Viet Cong air defenses began to exact a toll on the converted Huey gunships. Weighted down with armament it was not designed to carry, the normally agile Hueys were too sluggish and unwieldy for a dedicated attack role. In September 1967, the Army brought the AH-1G Huey Cobra to Vietnam. The Huey Cobra was quickly deployed by several Army cavalry and airborne divisions. It put the stamp of approval on the air mobile concept. The Bell Helicopter Company was aware of the Huey gunship's inherent limitations as a weapons platform. On their own, Bell designed the armed attack Cobra using the Huey's powertrain. With its lighter airframe, the Cobra was faster, more maneuverable, and better armed. An ample store of 2.75-inch rockets were fired from the launchers hung on each side of the Cobra's stubby weapon wings. They were fired by the gunner who flew in the Cobra's front seat. Easy to store and reload in the field, the 2.75s were potent threats to Viet Cong facilities, equipment, and personnel. The Cobra's supply of 7.62 millimeter projectiles was fired from its M16 minigun pod. The minigun pods were hung from the weapon wings beside the rocket launchers. This weapon allowed the Cobra gunner to lay fire on the VC while in close proximity to friendly ground troops. Beneath the Cobra's nose was an M28 minigun, which also fired 7.62 millimeter projectiles. This minigun was unique in that it was mounted on a flexible turret system. With the turret, a gunner could attack Viet Cong positions on either side of the helicopter, as well as directly in front. The Huey Cobra was the most lethal helicopter to date. It was soon known to friend and foe alike as a devastating weapons platform. No one who saw it in action throughout Southeast Asia would ever forget it. The Cobra gained its greatest fame with the Army's 1st and 101st Cavalry Air Mobile Divisions. Airborne brigades also loved it. From the demilitarized zone to the Mekong Delta, Cobra-led attacks were frequently the turning point for the destruction of Viet Cong forces. The Marines started flying Huey Cobras in 1969. They immediately saw their battle successes increase and losses decrease. Soon, no heliborne operation would choose to be without an AH-1G Huey Cobra as their escort. A valuable Cobra ally was the OH-58 Kiowa observation helicopter. The brave pilots which flew the virtually unarmed Kiowas fired phosphorus rocket markers to spot landing zones and VC targets for the Cobras. Cobras would typically escort troop-carrying Hueys and observation Kiowas into a landing zone. Once there, each would do its job to secure the area. The Viet Cong tried their best to avoid open confrontation with air mobile forces. The Hueys, Kiowas, and Cobras formed a perfect partnership. Working in tandem, they would pull off one successful operation after another. There was no crucial battle throughout South Vietnam in which air mobility did not play a part. After successfully securing the area, the Kiowas would spot the pickup zone for the victorious troops. The Viet Cong suffered heavy material and personnel losses from the fire of air mobility. The scars of war should serve to remind all that victory is never absolute, for everyone loses something in the fight. We can only hope that the forces of good will somehow overcome those who seek to do harm in the world. After the end of the Vietnam War, the Army continued to develop the battle-proven Huey Cobra. It was soon outfitted with TOW and Hellfire anti-tank weapons, lethal enough to penetrate the thickest armor. The Cobra's new assignment was to patrol the border between West and East Germany. The Cobra was now more lethal than ever. Its tank-killing capability was only the beginning of the attack helicopter's next evolutionary stage. Soviet tanks had more to fear than ever before if they were to cross the border. The Army then developed the modernized AH-1S Cobra. They made it more survivable by adding a flat glint reducing canopy, laser weapon sight, engine exhaust infrared suppressor, infrared jammer, and sophisticated electronic countermeasure equipment. The attack helicopter could now fight and survive. The next battlefield the attack helicopter was to prove itself on was the Caribbean island of Grenada. Communist units from Cuba had overthrown the government and held U.S. citizens hostage. New Army UH-60 Black Hawk transports were to see action alongside updated Marine twin-engine Hueys. CH-46s carried heavy troop and cargo loads to the front. These sea-launched assaults provided a safe island landing for ground personnel. The Marines had developed their beloved Cobra into the AH-1W Super Cobra. To fulfill the Corps' many tasks, they equipped the Super Cobra with both anti-tank and anti-air weapons. The Super Cobra performed admirably in Grenada. Soviet-supplied BTR-60 armored personnel carriers were choice Super Cobra targets. Only minimum helicopter losses were suffered in the fight for the island's liberation. The rescued U.S. citizens were very grateful for the help given to them by the Army and Marine Corps. They eagerly expressed their thanks as they boarded C-141 transports headed for home. Despite the intense competition, the Army's AH-64 Apache is still the most lethal and survivable attack helicopter in the world. Hopefully the day will never arrive when the Apache sees combat. But if that time comes, the Apache is ready, willing, and able to do the job.